Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Jacob. This week on Eating with Evans, we're going to make some homemade pasta. We're going to saute that with some tomatoes, basil, garlic, olive oil, and a little Parmesan cheese. If you haven't already, check out my Instagram page here at Eating with Evans. This is where I post all of my meals throughout the week that you wouldn't necessarily see here on my YouTube channel. If you're looking for something great to top this homemade pasta, check out my bolognese recipe that I've linked in the card above. This is a slow simmered bolognese that took about 2.5 hours and it's well worth the time. Now without further ado, let's go make some pasta. This week we're making fresh egg pasta. To do this we need 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 3 whole eggs. Once we're done making the pasta, we're going to roll it out into sheets and cut it into fettuccine, and we're going to saute it with the same good quality olive oil, 10 ounces of sauteed cherry or grape tomatoes, 2 or 3 cloves of freshly minced garlic, and about 1 ounce of torn basil. The equipment that we're going to use this week starts with a regular rolling pin. You can use a French rolling pin or a standard one like this. A bench scraper that we're going to use to divide the pasta. I have a pasta drying rack here, which instead of using this, if you don't have one of these at home, you can lay out some clean dish towels on your work surface, lightly dust it with flour, and lay your pasta sheets out to dry, instead of having something specialized like this. The last piece of equipment that I'm going to use is this pasta roller that I can hook up to my KitchenAid mixer. It has multiple attachments so that I can vary the thickness with this standard pasta roller here, and then it's got 2 different attachments to cut either a linguine or a spaghetti style noodle. If you don't have a pasta roller like this at home, what you're going to want to do is use a rolling pin. The difficulty of using a rolling pin like this at home to roll out your pasta is that it's difficult to get it evenly thick all the way across the pasta sheet, whereas with one of these pasta rollers you don't even really think about it. You just set it to this right setting and it's going to consistently make the pasta to the right thickness every single time. The other advantage to having these is you're going to get even cuts of pasta all the way across. To start our recipe making this fresh pasta, we need to put 2 cups of flour directly on our clean work surface. It's essential that you clean your work surface really well before you start this. All of the mixing of this pasta is going to be done directly here on the work surface. We're going to make a well in the center of our flour. You want to make this wide enough that your eggs sit deeply in the well, and you don't want to make any wall too short, or else you'll have egg escape out the sides. So I'm going to break 3 eggs into a separate container. This way, if there's anything wrong with my eggs, I won't waste the flour by putting a bad egg directly into it. So now we'll pour our eggs directly into the center of this well of flour. And just like you're mixing an omelet, you're going to beat these eggs. And you can tell they're going to slowly start to incorporate some flour. Once you get to the point where it's thick enough where you can start handling it with your own hands, you can lose the fork. What I've started to notice as I've rolled this out is there's a lot of moisture in this dough, and what I've learned making homemade pasta is that one day can be totally different than the next, whether the humidity is different in the room or your eggs are a little bit bigger than they were the last time. Sometimes you have to accommodate for the recipe by adding a little bit more flour or using a little less flour depending on how much moisture you have in your dough. Right now I have a good amount of moisture, so I'm going to sprinkle on a little bit more flour, and I'm going to continue to mix this dough. So what I'm doing when I'm kneading is I'm pushing away with the palm of my hand, where it started to stick right there. Add a little more flour. Push it away with the palm of my hand and fold itself over. After you've kneaded your dough for between 2 and 3 minutes, the reason you're kneading the dough is to incorporate the flour in with the egg so that there's the right amount of moisture, but you're also starting to develop gluten by the kneading process. Gluten is what gives pasta its bite. It's what makes it chewy. Without gluten, it would just kind of fall apart. Once you've completed kneading your dough, we're gonna wrap this ball in saran wrap. We're gonna let this ball of dough rest in your fridge for about an hour while we do all the cutting of the vegetables. I've washed all of my tomatoes, and this is 10 ounces of grape tomatoes. Because these tomatoes are round and they can potentially be hard to cut if you're not holding them, what I like to do is use 2 fingers. I put my knife down first, go over the top with the 2 fingers, and make 1 slice backward. This way I know my fingers are out of the way and I'm never gonna cut them. Completed slicing my tomatoes in half, and this is 10 ounces of tomatoes. Using my garlic press, I'm going to crush 3 cloves of garlic. For the garlic press, you can put the clove of garlic directly in with the skin on, and when you crush it into your bowl, you can see that you've got all your minced garlic there, no problem. You're going to use the back side of your knife to scrape off the front of the garlic press into the bowl, and then when you open it up, all your skin is left behind. It's pretty great. It's a great time saver. This is my 3 cloves of garlic crushed with my garlic press. After you've let your pasta rest in the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes, but it would be better to go for an hour, you want to take it out of the refrigerator. You want to dust your work surface with a generous amount of flour. When you take it out of your saran wrap, you're going to dust the top with flour. Make sure that it's got even flour on both sides. I'm going to roll it out a bit. Once I've rolled this into a manageable sized piece, I'm going to use my bench scraper to divide the dough. It's helpful if you put a little flour on your bench scraper so it doesn't stick. I'm going to make 4 equal portions. These 4 equal portions are going to end up being the servings of our pasta once we roll it out. You can see that I've brought out my KitchenAid mixer with my pasta rolling attachment. Now I have this set to the widest setting right now because we've got these thick sheets of pasta that we're going to roll through. What we're going to do is laminate the dough. What that means is as I roll it through, it's going to come out in a sheet and I'm going to lay it in thirds on top of one another. And then I'm going to run it through the pasta roller again and keep doing that process until the edges go from looking ragged to being smooth edges on the side. I've made sure that my dough is liberally floured. When it goes through these rollers for the first time, the last thing you want is for this to stick. So at this point, I'm going to start my machine. You want it on a low setting. You can see how that came out a little uneven. You can tell that it's sticky, so we still need a little more flour. Make sure both sides are coated evenly with flour. You don't want big globs either. I'm going to run this through a second time. And now we're going to start the process of lamination. So I'm going to fold this over once on itself and again twice. And now I'm going to run it through the pasta machine on the seam end where we've got an opening. You can tell after just a few times passing through that pasta machine that the consistency has gotten a lot more smooth and there's no cracking going on in the edges. So now what I'm going to do is start to form this down into more of a pasta noodle shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to the next setting and run it through each setting 2 times so that we make sure that we actually get it pressed to the right setting. So I've rolled this out to the thickness that I really want it to be. I can start to see my fingers through it, so that's telling me that it's thin enough. On my machine, that was a 6 out of 8, so I could have gone a little bit thinner, but I want the pasta to be a little thicker than angel hair. So what I'm gonna do now is hang this to dry. Now we're just gonna continue this for the other 3 servings of pasta. that we finished rolling out the pasta, I'm going to let it keep drying on the drying rack for around 15 minutes so that it goes through the cutting blades of the next attachment a little bit easier. Put on the next attachment, which is the fettuccine attachment, which has the blades a little bit wider than spaghetti would be. And we've allowed our pasta to dry on our drying rack. So next thing we're going to do is start cutting the pasta. Here are my 4 equal portions of freshly made pasta. The next step is to move over to the stove so that we can cook the rest of our meal. I just added 3 tablespoons of salt to this water. If you remember when we made the pasta, there was no salt added to the pasta, so the only way that we're going to impart salt into the flavor of the pasta is by adding it to this water. The next step is to turn our pan on high heat, and we're going to add a couple tablespoons of good quality olive oil. Now that our oil is preheated, I'm going to turn the pan down to medium and add in our 10 ounces of tomatoes. I'm going to add a pinch of salt. That's going to help pull out some of the moisture in these tomatoes. Now that we've got our tomatoes going, I'm going to add all of our pasta into the pasta water. I'm going to instantly stir this so it doesn't stick. Because this is fresh pasta, this is only going to take between 3 and 4 minutes to cook. You can tell that our tomatoes are starting to soften up, so I'm going to add in our 3 cloves of garlic to this. I'm going to turn off the heat to this pasta because it's completed cooking. Now I'm going to add my pasta into my pan. So now I'm going to toss this to combine. To this I'm going to add some freshly torn basil, about 1 ounce of basil. Once it gets added to this, it's going to wilt down, so 1 ounce is plenty. Now that all my basil's added, I'm going to toss it to combine. I'm going to add a little pasta water, between a half a cup and a cup. This is going to loosen this up a little bit, and it's going to help me create an emulsion. The final piece of this is to grate in some Parmesan cheese. I'm going to grate in about a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese for this recipe. Now mix all this to combine. You can see that as the cheese melts and it combines with the pasta water, the starch in the pasta water actually helped create an emulsion, which made this a super rich and creamy sauce. And this is the final dish. This is homemade fettuccine, tossed in olive oil, tomato, and basil, mixed with a little Parmesan cheese and pasta water to create a thick, creamy sauce, and of course topped with more Parmesan cheese shredded on top. If you guys love that recipe for some simple homemade pasta as much as I do, be sure to hit the like button below. If you want to see more content from me on a weekly basis, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so that you're notified every single time that I put out a new video. If you guys try out any of my recipes, be sure to tag me on social media. I would love to see anything you guys make. Until next time. Ooh, lady, do you want some pasta? Ooh, that's good. Was that good?